Good evening and welcome to Global Lens on Apna Watan TV. I am Saadia Afzaal. Tonight we examine one of the most alarming specters in international relations today, the possibility that the conflict between Russia and NATO could escalate into something far worse, even a World War III. We have seen repeated provocations, drone incursions, war games, nuclear rhetoric and mutual warnings. Tensions are rising on Europe's eastern flank. For countries far from that front line, including Pakistan, this is not abstract speculation. Global wars draw in alliances, economies, supply chains, in fact, everything we depend on. So how close are we to a wider war? What are the triggers? What does each side want? And how should Pakistan prepare, position, and respond if things go south? NATO allies recently accused Russia of sending multiple drones into Polish airspace. Some of these drones were shot down, others detected. The number of incursions and the frequency suggest these are not accidental. Some analysts see them as probes to test NATO's readiness, reaction time, and air defenses. Because of the repeated airspace breaches, Poland triggered Article 4. Consultations among NATO allies about a serious threat to sovereignty, but not yet full collective defense, which would be Article 5. It shows Polish and NATO concern over Russian actions. Russia and Belarus began large joint military war games near NATO's eastern border under Zapad 2025. These drills include simulations of airstrikes, sabotage, and reports suggest involvement of missiles and possibly planning for use of nuclear tactical weapons. NATO and neighboring countries are watching closely. Russian leaders have repeatedly warned that a direct conflict with NATO is one step away from World War III if NATO crosses certain red lines. Likewise, NATO countries are reinforcing their eastern front, sending in more air defense, troops, and underlining collective defense doctrine. Beyond overt military moves, there are reports of cyber operations, misinformation, drone incursions, possibly sabotage, all of which create tension while still giving states a degree of deniability. These are not isolated events. They form a pattern: co-location of military might, incremental escalation, and testing boundaries. What might push this from tension and brinksmanship into full-scale war or a broader conflict involving multiple states? Number one, major airspace violations or attacks on NATO territory. If missiles, drones, or rockets strike within the territory of a NATO member, especially civilian zones, that could force some kind of collective response. If Russia or its proxies invade or target directly, the legal and political pressure for NATO to respond increases drastically. Number two, accidental crossfire or miscalculation. In such a tense environment, simple mistake like misidentified aircraft, misfired missile, or interception gone wrong can spiral. Once one country acts, others respond, often more strongly. Number three, use of tactical nuclear or low-yield nuclear weapons. If conflict extends and Russia or NATO feel cornered, one side might use tactical nuclear weapons to deter or punish. Once nuclear weapons are used, even on a small scale, the risk of escalation becomes existential. Number four, further NATO expansion or inclusion of Ukraine. Russian leadership has repeatedly warned that bringing Ukraine fully into NATO is a red line. Should Ukraine get full membership or a strong enough security guarantee, Russia may view that as a direct security threat and may escalate. Number five, provocations during major war games or military exercises. Exercises like Zapad 2025 could be used as cover for actual operations, staging or surprise moves, if paired with provocations like drone violations, missile launches, or cyber attacks in the same period, the risk of escalation is much higher. Number 6. Economic sanctions. Heavy sanctions by NATO or Western powers on Russia or its allies may provoke asymmetric responses, disrupting supply chains and energy, but also military retaliation or asymmetric warfare. Here's what Russia and NATO might perceive as their winning points and risks. Understanding both helps us see how likely escalation might be. First, let's talk about Russia. What could be advantages or goals? Number 1, regaining strong regional control over buffer zones like Ukraine and Belarus to keep NATO's eastern expansion in check. 2, using military posturing to gain diplomatic leverage, negotiate from strength, and trade security guarantees. And 3, internal legitimacy like projecting strength at home, showing that Western encroachment will not be tolerated. So there are some risks involved too, like facing a unified NATO response with stronger deployments, intelligence and defense systems, economic damage from sanctions, isolation, loss of access to international technologies and supply chains, and if war is expanded, it can suffer high casualties, especially given the logistical strains Russia already has in Ukraine, and possibility of nuclear confrontation or backlash that could spiral out of control. Now let's have a look at advantages or goals for NATO and the West. Number 1, protecting member states and preserving the principle of collective defense. Then deterring Russian aggression via strength and readiness. Using diplomatic and economic pressure to isolate Russia and reduce its geopolitical leverage. And risks might involve being drawn into war beyond Ukraine. If NATO forces get directly involved, escalation could be rapid. Then domestic political costs of war, casualties, expense, and possible support fatigue. Supply chain disruptions, energy dependency issues, especially for Europe, disruption in food, fuel, and other commodities. Also, the risk of miscalculation. A misstep could force a full escalation neither side wants. What does all this mean for Pakistan, strategically, economically, and diplomatically? 1. Economic fallout. Wars of this scale disturb global energy markets. Pakistan is already energy import dependent. Sharp increases in oil, gas, fuel prices will hurt. Disruption of grain and food supplies if war extends or sanctions blockade trade routes. Even indirectly, our imports could be affected. Number 2, diplomatic balancing. Pakistan maintains relationships with both Russia and Western powers. In a full-scale Russia-NATO war, there will be pressure to choose sides. Blanket neutrality may be difficult under sanctions or diplomatic pressure. Then, we will need to safeguard our diplomatic autonomy, ensuring we are not forced into positions against our national interests. Let's talk about security risks. Spillover risks are involved, like refugee flows, cross-border instability, cyber warfare, or information war reaching us. Increased militarization of global powers may lead to new alliances. Pakistan will have to assess where we fit, where we might be pressured to support one bloc. Then, supply chains and trade. Pakistan's trade routes, exports and imports could be disrupted, like energy, raw materials, or tech goods. Global sanctions may affect availability of some necessary inputs. If shipping insurance rates go up due to war risks, cost of imports may rise sharply. Then there is domestic instability. Economic shocks often create political instability. Rising inflation, energy shortage, and food insecurity may stress government capacity. Also, public opinion matters. People will expect government to protect national interests, prevent entanglement, and manage fallout. But there are some opportunities as well. Pakistan can leverage its position as relatively neutral to act as mediator or have a voice in peace process. Strengthening its own defense and cybersecurity posture, investing in alternative supply routes, and strengthening domestic production of critical goods. Then, deepening ties with countries both in the global south and within Asia to diversify diplomatic and trade partners. Here are the key questions Pakistan should be asking and steps to consider to navigate a possible escalating Russia-NATO conflict. What are our red lines? What level of involvement or what casualties or economic damage would force Pakistan to act or take sides? Having clarity in foreign policy is essential. Then, how dependent are we on energy, food, tech imports from potential conflict zones, Europe, Russia, or Ukraine? Can we diversify, build buffering stocks, secure trade routes? How robust is our intelligence, early warning, diplomatic infrastructure? Can we detect escalation early, maintain communication channels with all parties? And how do we manage public expectations and information? In times of tension, misinformation spreads, transparency, measured public communication will be important. Can Pakistan invest in strong defense, including counter-drone, air defense, cybersecurity? Even if not directly involved, threats will include hybrid warfare. Diplomatic alliances. Let's talk about them. Should we deepen ties with certain blocs? Which relationships are more strategic? With China, with Russia, with European countries, with the US? Aim for flexible hedging rather than rigid alignment. Let's imagine worst-case escalations to understand what World War III might actually look like if it happens, not in Hollywood, but realistically. Multi-front war, Russia pushing forward in Ukraine, possibly expanding into Baltic states, NATO responding with troops, air and naval forces, other theaters possibly opening up, cyber, supply lines and global naval choke points. Use of tactical nuclear weapons. If standard forces are unable to stop escalation, or if one side feels existentially threatened, they might cross threshold. Once nuclear weapons are used, danger becomes more greater. Then global alliance entanglements. Other states being drawn in either by treaties, by need, or by coercion. Then you have supply chains cut, trade embargoes, global economic recession, catastrophic civilian impact, not just soldiers but civilians displaced, infrastructure destroyed, particularly in Europe, refugee crisis, energy starvation, food insecurity and global inflation. Then you can see long-term consequences, enormous human economic costs, reconstruction, redrawing borders, shifting of global power balance, possible realignment of alliances globally. We are not yet in World War III, but the signs are there. Rising provocations, military buildup, open drone incursions, war games, nuclear rhetoric. The risk is real and would carry consequences far beyond Europe. For Pakistan, this is a moment to be alert, not alarmed, to prepare, to protect our interests, to diversify, and to strengthen resilience. Whether in diplomacy, economy, defense, or internal stability, we must act now because the costs of being unprepared are too high. This is Saadia Afzaal for Apna Watan TV.
You are watching Apna Watan.